Hi guys, welcome to Module 1. Now that we have set up Sketchup, it's time to investigate more about how to create 2D floor plans. So, over the next couple of videos, I will show you 3 different ways on how to do that, and by the end of this module, we will start creating our 2D floor plan for our Eden Springs house. Let's get started. Hi everyone! In today's class, we will be diving into the world of floor plans, a crucial component of interior design. Before we embark on the journey of creating a floor plan, spatial plan or 3D designs, it is essential to grasp the purpose of a floor plan and why it is indispensable. So what exactly is a floor plan? A floor plan serves as a two-dimensional representation of an interior space or building, typically depicted from a top-down perspective on a flat surface such as paper or a computer screen. It offers a simplified layout of the space, encompassing all the rooms, windows, walls, and fixed features like fireplaces. Architects, designers, and builders frequently utilize 2D floor plans during the planning and construction phase of a project to provide an accurate portrayal of space and identify potential issues that require attention before constructing commences. As interior designers, we can create a simplified version of these building plans to establish a foundation for our work to build upon. Subsequently, we employ spatial planning, also known as space planning. Spatial planning specifically refers to the process of organizing and arranging the physical space of a room or building and fill it with furniture, display bathrooms, or kitchen designs. It entails determining the most effective and efficient use of the available space, taking into account factors such as traffic flow, accessibility, and the intended purpose of the space. After finalizing our floor plan and spatial plan, we can then determine the products we need to purchase and at the same time start building our 3D design using the drawn walls from our floor plan. So you can see that a detailed floor and spatial plan is key to a clean and good workflow. In the upcoming lessons, we will dive first into the fundamentals of surfaces, edges, and groups. Following that, we will explore real-life scenarios on how to create 2D floor plans using Sketchup. By the end of Module 1, you will be able to create our Eden Springs floor and let's get started! Hey guys! Before we dive into the various methods of creating floor plans, it's crucial to understand some fundamentals about surfaces and edges. Let's have a look first at the axis that you see here. The blue axis indicates up and down. The green axis shows forward and backwards, and the red axis is to move left and right. So in SketchUp, we have 10 different tools on how to create 2D surfaces depending on what shape you are looking for to create. Let's start with the line tool. You can find it on the left toolbar or by clicking L on your keyboard. By clicking once and releasing, you create a dot, which then is attached to a rubber band effect. The rubber band shows you the direction in which you will continue your line. You can use now the arrow keys to fixate it in a different axis direction. The up arrow will let your line go up and down. The left arrow will move forward and backwards, and the right arrow will let you move left and right. You don't have to fixate your direction, but sometimes it's very useful, as you will see over the next lessons. Now I want to draw in the right direction, so I can simply move my mouse, or I lock the direction by clicking on the right arrow. If you click the right arrow again, the lock will be released. You see on the right bottom corner that Sketchup calculates the distance of that line for you. You now have two options. You can move your mouse along the axis until you have your desired measure, or you can simply type in the measure you need. Let's try this out with 500 millimeters, which equals 19.7 inches. I will also show you on how to do that in inches template in just a moment. So we click and release the mouse, then we type 500 and enter. Now our line is 500 millimeters long. Let's try this with the inches. You click and release and type 19.7 inches and enter. If you prefer to work with fractions, you can always change your unit preferences by going to Window, Model Info and Unit. Here you can choose the format and also your precision. I will continue providing you the measures for inches since it's the fastest to type in. You can obviously change the precision for the metrical version too. Let's continue drawing a rectangle. Now, when you forgot what your measure was on the bottom of your line, you can use the inferencing snapping option by simply hover over the point and slowly move up. You see that Sketchup creates a dotted line, which indicates you are drawing straight in the same line as your bottom dot. This is very helpful, as sometimes you don't always see the lines that clear, and this will make sure that your lines are straight. Once you close your rectangle in Sketchup, it creates a surface in the middle of your rectangle. Now this is very important to understand that in order to have a surface, your loop of edges or lines need to close. Very often I read comments by users not knowing why their wall disappeared or why they can't fill in their surface. It's really just somewhere the loop is not closed. That's really it. So always make sure your loop is closed in order to have your surface. So thankfully, we don't have to draw all our lines with the line tool. So there are other tools on your toolbar that create predefined shapes. Let's have a look at the rectangle tool. You can click R or see it on your toolbar. Once you click and release, Sketchup already shows you all four corners. At the bottom right, you see two measures. One is the width, which indicates also the direction of the red axis. The second one is the length, which indicates the direction of the green axis. Let's say we want to create a 500 millimeters wide and 200 millimeters long shape. We do this by separating those two measures with a comma. So we type in 500, 200 and enter. The comma in between is very important, otherwise Sketchup doesn't know what to do with it. So now in inches, you would type in 19.7 inches, 7.8 inches and enter. It's easy, you just need to remember how to type this in. Next, have a look at the circle tool by clicking C, or you can find it also on the left toolbar. Once you click and release, it provides you the radius of your circle. So if I want to create a coffee table, let's say that is 600 diameters, which has obviously a radius of 300 millimeters, you could simply type in 300 and enter. If you wish to recheck your measurements, you can use the tape measure by pressing T or select it from your toolbar on the left. There's one important thing I want to mention here. When you select the circle tool, it shows you a number on the bottom before even clicking. As you see here, 24 means that your circle will be made of 24 segments. If you create small circles, this might work just fine. But if you do create big circles, like we just did, you literally see the corners. To avoid this, you have to tell Sketchup how many segments you want your circle to be. Let's try this with 60 instead of 24, and you will see the difference. Now I type in 60 and enter and start my circle. Do you see the difference? This is super important. Many don't know this and wonder why their circles look so undefined. Now the next tool I use is the 2-point arc. Click A or find it also on the toolbar. Here we have the same option about choosing our segments, and let's increase it and say we want 25 segments. Then I click and select my first point and click to find the second point. Now I just move my mouse and see it does create an arc for me. This is useful when creating arched doors, for instance. If you want to exit an active drawing tool, you can use the Escape key or the space button. What you may have noticed now is once the shapes overlap in Sketchup, it automatically divides the surfaces. So when you select the surfaces or the edges, you can use your Shift key to select multiple. If you remove a line by selecting it and then use your backspace key or the erase tool on the left side of your toolbar, the surface is going to disappear, which now in conclusion is important to understand that we really need to have a closed loop in order to create a surface. Now that we know how to use the line tool, the rectangle tool, circle, and the 2-point arc tool, let's just quickly jump to the other tools. To be honest, some of them I never used for my projects, but maybe you might find some use of them. Now that you know how to draw shapes in Sketchup, please go ahead and try all of the 10 tools. See you in the next lesson. Hi guys! In this lesson, we will talk about how to move shapes, meaning lines and surfaces, and how to copy, group, rotate, and scale them. For this lesson, I have created some basic shapes for you. Now, when I select my Move tool from my toolbar, or clicking M on my keyboard and start moving a line, for instance, you will notice that the line is sticky to the whole rest of the shape. If I click on the surface, I can then move it. It helps to use your arrow keys to fixate an axis direction. I could also select the parts I want to move only. So when it comes to selecting, you will see that There's a difference when I start selecting from left to right and from right to left. Left to right only selects everything that is within the selection rectangle. If you go from right to left, it selects everything that the select tool touches. If I want to move my circle now, I have to press Escape or click outside my selection. Let's now say I want to make a copy of this rectangle. I select my whole shape, then I use my Move tool, and by pressing my Option or Control key, you see a little plus sign appearing underneath my tool symbol. This indicates that I create a copy of exactly what I have selected. Now if I want to make another copy, I have to press my Option or Control key again. I could also decide to copy this shape and move it to a certain distance. It always calculates from the dot you were selecting. Let's talk about groups now and why they are so important. Right now you see that once lines and faces overlap, they kind of merge together since they are sticky. Let's see how the same process would look if we would have grouped our lines and surfaces into one contained group. Let me now select the rectangle again, and by clicking Command G or Control G, you see that now I have gotten a contained group. If I start copying my group now, twice, like we just did, on top of each other, you will see that now they won't interfere with each other and they are not sticky anymore. They are two separate contained groups. I can always ungroup my groups by clicking Right, Explode. This way, they are an open source again. Let's have a look now at this room with those two windows. Let's say I want to copy this window to the right. I could either select all surfaces and use my Shift button to add more surfaces and then move and copy it. Just be careful to move it within the correct line, since right now, you know, nothing is grouped. It means if you move it by accident here, your plan starts to divide. So it helps to group your windows before moving them. This way, you can freely move them around. Now, if you haven't created any groups yet, and you do that while the windows are combined with the walls, you will see that the area underneath it will be cut out. So if you don't want this to happen, you could start creating your walls first, group them, and create your windows and group them. But sometimes it might be useful to do the other way around and only group the windows after they are already drawn together within your walls. You will find more about this in the next lessons when we start building our main floor plan. I could now copy my window to the other wall and use my Move tool to rotate by hovering over until I see the dotted red line. I can also use the Rotate tool for that, even though I think it's a kind of redundant since we have this tool already integrated in the Move tool. If I was to make this window bigger, I have to go inside my group by double-clicking. You can see the dotted line around indicating you are currently inside your group. Now my lines and surfaces are sticky again. I could then select the surface and move it further away to make my window bigger. With Escape, you can leave your group and you are back to the normal level. The last thing I would like to show you is the Scale tool. Now when I select my group, I can see 8 green dots around my group showing me which direction I could scale my objects to. It's easy to scale rectangle shapes. Just be careful when scaling round shapes, as they start to distort. We will discuss the Scale tool further once we start working with furniture later in this course. So please go ahead, try out what we have just learned, and I will see you in the next lesson. As an interior designer, you may come across different situations when it comes to creating a 2D plan. Now that you have learned on how to draw surfaces and edges in Sketchup, it's time to have a look at those real-life situations. Let's talk about the first one. Imagine you have a friend or a client who has asked you to redesign a kitchen for him or her. For the purpose of this discussion, I will refer to your friend as a client, as it's essential to maintain a professional approach even when working with family or friends. Suppose your client does not have any plans from an architect or a builder. In that case, you would go and visit your client and you would start by sketching the rooms on a piece of paper or maybe your iPad. Maybe your client doesn't live close by. In that case, he or she may provide you with a sketch that they already created. In either case, you would end up with something that may look like this. Obviously, you can also mark electrical sockets, water outlets, sewage pipes, etc. For this purpose of understanding the approach mainly, I only drew doors, windows, and walls. You can find this PDF document in the download section. Now, this is obviously not a scaled plan, so it doesn't make sense to import this into Sketchup. Instead, we use guides to build our plan. We have two approaches here. As I mentioned, we start with creating guides by pressing the key T, or you find the tape measure on the left toolbar. It doesn't matter where we start drawing, since Sketchup has the infinity ground. But it makes sense to draw close to the axis, since we can use those as our anchor points. We know the measurements of our kitchen. You can always have a look at the PDF that is provided in the download section, as I mentioned. So now we know our kitchen has a width of 3690 millimeters. So we snap to the green axis and we type in the measure. This will create our first guide. Now we snap to the red axis and we type 6930. Now that we have our guides, we can use the rectangle tool to simply create the inner rectangle of this kitchen. Now we also need the outside walls. Let's say this wall is 150 millimeters thick, which equals 5.9 inches. We again use our tape measure to create outside guides, and then we can create the other rectangle. We now have the frame for our walls. You can remove the guides by selecting them one by one and use the backspace key to remove them. Or you can remove them all at once by clicking Edit, Delete Guides. Let's have a look at how else you could create this. We select the rectangle tool, but this time we don't create guides. We simply click with the rectangle tool once and we type in 3690, 6930 or the inches measurement. And we enter. So now we already have the rectangle. So instead of creating another rectangle, there is another tool I want to show you, which is really amazing. It's called the offset tool. You can find it by clicking F, or you select it from your left toolbar. Now we click on the surface that we want to offset, but we don't release the mouse. We simply keep the mouse on and hover until we find the measure that we need, and then we release. And sometimes, as you can see, it's not that easy to find exactly the measure we need. So as I said before, as long as you don't move your mouse again, you can always type in the measure and SketchUp is going to fix it. So let's type in 150 or 5.9 inches and then we click enter. Since we did create already the inner rectangle of the kitchen, we actually need the outside walls. So let's go back by pressing Command Z or Control Z on PC, or you can use the undo and redo on top of your toolbar. Let's now select the offset tool again by clicking F, and this time we move to the outside of the rectangle. So we offset the surface outside of this rectangle. And here we go again, type in the measure we need, we enter, and we can use the tape to recheck the measurements. You will see that you may use a combination of those ways to create your lines and surfaces. It doesn't really matter which way you choose. If you prefer to work with guides or use the rectangle or the line tool right away. So it's just a matter of your preference. When it comes to showcasing windows, I usually measure a 50mm or a 2-inch frame to create a simple line. I can also duplicate a line that already exists by selecting it and using the M tool. You can also find it on your left toolbar. And I can duplicate this line. Once I select the line and I'm within my Move tool, I can press Option when using a Mac or Control when using a PC. Now you see that there is a little plus sign showing up. This indicates that you're copying the line, but only once. If you click the Option or the Alt key another time, you see a little figure that indicates that you will create multiple copies. Here we can also type in the measure we want to move the line to. Then I would need a middle glass panel for my window, so I snap into the midpoint of my line and use the line tool to create it. When we advance a little further in the course, I will show you on how to find pre-made 2D symbols like doors and windows and how to adjust them. For now, I would recommend you learn to draw them from scratch to understand how they work. Be careful when you move lines or surfaces, since right now they are not grouped, meaning they are sticky. So if you move a line or surface, it can mess up your drawing. So in case you move somewhere where you don't want to be, you can always use your escape button. When it comes to creating the door, I usually use the pie tool. So I click on one point, then to the other, and I open the door 45 degrees. Okay guys, we're done for now. This lesson was to only showcase how you start with creating the really basics in drawing, based on a sketch layout. Feel free to recreate this if you are a complete beginner in SketchUp, or you move on if you already know how to create this. In the next lesson, we will dive into situation number 2, which is on how to import digital plans like JPEGs, PNGs, PDFs, and how to scale them up to have a base that we can use to create our floor plan. In the previous lesson, we have seen how we draw floor plans only with creating guides and reading our measurements from a piece of paper or a scan-sketched floor plan that your client has sent you. Now let's have a look at situation number 2. As an interior designer, you will often receive digital floor plans created by architects or even some that may be very basic. These plans may come in different file formats such as JPEGs, PNGs or PDFs, and the quality of the measurements can also greatly vary. Some may be very detailed, while others may have a few measurements only. Although it is ideal to receive building plans directly from an architect, this is not always possible. To effectively work with these digital files in SketchUp, it is important to know how to import them and how to scale them to the correct measurements. Be informed that we need at least one measurement on the plan to be able to scale them up. Let's see now how to import these files into SketchUp and how to scale them to the correct measurement. Let's start by importing a very basic layout, which has just a few measurements available. I deleted the previous drawing from situation number 1 to make room for this file. You can do so too, or you can create a new file by clicking File, New. This will open the default template that you chose as your favorite. Just so you're informed, you won't have to redraw this example, since you will definitely get a chance in the next lessons to create the actual house plans. What is more important here is for you to at least see and maybe try out how to import a file and how to scale it up. Also, I want to show you a couple more things before we dive into the actual project. So you decide whether you want to recreate this plan for another practice, or you feel already fit to draw plans so you can just watch and make your notes. Okay, we start by clicking File, Import. Now you see all the supported files SketchUp can import for you. You choose your file and import. Now the plan is floating over the working space and we need to ground it to the bottom. We can do so by selecting the midpoint of the axis and move the mouse and click another time to fixate the plan. When I use my tape measurements tool now and recheck the length of the measure, you will see that it's not big enough, so we need to scale it. So while we have the plan selected, I'm gonna use the tape measure again, and I fixate the measure with the tape measure by clicking once at the beginning and clicking another time until the end, until we see the measure appearing on the right bottom corner. Now we simply type in the number we need and we enter. As you see now, we have a pop-up that appears that is asking us if we want to resize the plan. Here we just click yes, and SketchUp is scaling up the plan in the correct measure that you selected. You can recheck the measurements also again, just to make sure. Before I start drawing, I want to show you some predefined views SketchUp offers on the toolbar that we have adjusted previously. So this icon you can select and it's gonna automatically orbit to the predefined view. So like the ISO view that is showing the 3 axes. Then you have the top view, you have front view, and all the side views of your project. That's gonna save you time to orbit instead of orbiting there. We select the top view to make sure SketchUp draws our lines on the ground and not underneath or above it. Then you see another blue icon, which is called X-ray. This is a very nice preview as it lets you see your project in an X-ray version where you are able to make the surface invisible, or let's say less visible. This way you can see underneath the imported file and you can draw your lines on top of it. So in the next few minutes, I will use the tools that I have already shown you in the previous lessons to create my walls, and we will come back for the doors again. Let's have a quick look into what grouping is within Sketchup. In simple words, it's like Sketchup is hugging your lines and surfaces and doesn't let go of them until you explode them. Meaning, whatever you select and group, you can move as a combined object while it's not sticky anymore. For this example, I will start grouping my walls and the surfaces. By clicking twice, you see it does select certain surfaces and its edges that surrounds it. By clicking 3 times, it selects all surfaces and edges that are connected. This is what we want. We click 3 times, and now let's say I want to group these into one group. So I click Command G or Control G for PC. Now it's a contained group that we can move as we want. If we want to make changes inside this group, we need to double click, and you can see that the preview slightly changes, and that is indicating that you are inside the group. By clicking Escape, you can go back or outside the group again to your main level. Let's now create the windows and group them. Since I have this window below as well, I can simply copy my group with the Move tool and move it to the spot I want it to be. I can also do the same for the doors, in case I have doors that have the same size. Now, if one of the doors have a different size, you can either create it from scratch like we did in the beginning, or you can copy the door that you have and adjust it accordingly. I will copy this door now and move it to the spot where I need it. Here I can use the Move tool to rotate it using the 4 red crosses that appear. And then I can click right and flip it along the axis I need. Then I go inside my door group. Since the lines and the edges within my groups are still sticky, I can simply select the surface and then move it, and with that I automatically adjust the door width. If at this point, when selecting the door, trying to flip the object, you don't see the option flip when clicking right, it means you are already working with the Sketchup 2023 version. When I recorded the first part of this video, I have used the 2022 version, and they got rid of this function in the 2023 version and replaced it with this flipping tool. Let's see how it works. I have to select the object I want to flip, and once selecting the flip tool from the left toolbar, you can see it has created 3 axes. Note that these axes are not the same axis as globally, meaning the object has been assigned to its own axis. In this case, the red axis will flip the object vertically from left to right, and the green axis horizontally from top to bottom. You can also use your left or right arrow key to navigate. Don't mind the blue axis for now, it will concern us later when we start using 3D. In 2D, we don't need it, since it will flip the symbol upside down, and we don't want that. If I want to open my groups, I can click right and say Explode. Now you don't have a group anymore, and you're having an open source again where the lines and the surfaces are sticky. I do find it easier to start working with groups as soon as you can in your model, to keep it clean and also organized, and to not mess up your lines and your walls, as you will see in the next lessons. It makes things very easy to work with groups. Feel free to import this JPEG file into your class project and scale it up, just so you have done it once at least. And you can also practice creating the groups as seen in this video. In the next lesson, we will have a look at situation number 3, where we will import a DWG file before starting our final project. In the more rare case, when you do receive a CAD file or so-called DWG file from the builder or the architect of your current project, you may be able to use this file to save yourself some time when it comes to building the floor plan. I don't really come across of those files that often, since many are subjected to copyrights and the builders or architects, they're not so willing to always share them. But if you do come across one, I still want to make sure you know what to do with them. In the same way as we import JPEGs or PDFs, you can click File, Import. And here you select DWG from the list. But before importing your file, have a quick look into the settings. I don't want to go too deep into this. What you need to know is that you can leave out the preserve settings, as you want your DWG file to be positioned close to the axis. Then the geometry, you can select all 3 options. And when it comes to unit, I always select model units, since many times I don't know what the original size was when the architect created the file. And this way Sketchup automatically detects it and scales it up. It works in most of the cases. Sometimes I do have to resize the model, but I will talk about this in just a second. Now, after importing, which may take some time depending on how big the CAD file is and how much detail there is in the file, it will be placed like this, very close to the axis. I have to say, unfortunately, there are many CAD files that are not very nicely prepared, which may lead to unfinished and broken lines when you import them. Some have suddenly some 3D objects in them, or they just look messy. So what do I use those DWG files for? Usually I like to draw my plan from scratch to be in full control of the measurements. But what can be important are, for example, the window heights. In case you are provided with a CAD file only, this is the only way you may be able to see how much space you have underneath or above windows. Sometimes I use the frame of the walls if they are clean. Just expect that with those CAD files, you may have to clean them up first before being able to actually use them. One of the first things I do is I check my scale and see, for instance, if my ceiling height is correct or any other measure that you may have. To be able to scale a CAD file, you need to go inside the CAD file, inside the group that was created. So the difference with having to scale a JPEG file in comparison with a CAD file is that you need to literally go inside the group to scale it up first. So let's go inside the group. Let's say I know my ceiling height is 2700 millimeters or 106.3 inches. Now I can see it is not up to scale for some reason. I can use the exact same technique that I actually used when scaling up a JPEG file or PDF, only with the difference that now I have lines, meaning that my tape measurement automatically wants to create guides. So I need to click the Option or the Alt key while selecting the tape measurement to remove the little ruler that appears under my symbol. Now it won't create the guides, it will simply measure. And then I click on the bottom and on the top and type my ceiling height in and then enter. This will then scale my plan to the correct measurement. So don't be scared if you have imported a CAD file and suddenly it's too small or too big. Just make sure to check with any reference measure that you have, like a ceiling or a door width, or it can be anything that you have. In most cases, the files come without a surface, meaning you only have lines to work with. The next I recommend is to explode your file by clicking right, explode, so you can access your lines better. Some groups may still exist for some objects, like the chairs or the tables or whatever is drawn on your files. That's okay, we can keep this grouped. Then I delete unnecessary lines and objects and basically clean up my file so I can work with it. And now to build up walls in the later stage, I do need a surface, meaning I need to get somehow my white surface back. I can use the line tool, I can draw over existing lines, I can try the rectangle tool. Sometimes it's a mix of both, really. There's no exact way of how to get the surfaces back, since files can be very complicated once they are produced. So with time you get a better understanding if it's worth to use the CAD file or if it just doesn't make any sense and just to create a floor plan by hand. Now you can see that some of the surfaces turned blue. This means that Sketchup for some reason decided to use the back side of the surface. So you just have to click on the surface and right click and then say reverse. So then you have the white front side again of the face. Since most CAD files are subjected to copyrights, I cannot directly share a file with you that you can import. But believe me, if you want to exercise this and have a look at some files, simply Google free DWG files and you will find multiple websites that provide those for educational purposes. Always check the license usage when you download a CAD file. As you have seen now while I was talking, I was able to create some walls which I could potentially use to build up my walls later on. So let's keep this lesson short. If you want to try importing a CAD file, please go ahead and find one of the multiple that are available. I just wanted to show you that it is possible to import those files and that you need to know that they may come with certain problems and adjustments. And we are finally going to start building our house project in the next lesson. I'm so excited. I hope you are too. See you there. Hi everyone, I'm thrilled to share with you the floor plan that we will build together, the Eden Springs project. I have a fondness for giving projects unique names. As interior designers, our task goes beyond creating aesthetic pleasing spaces. We strive to evoke emotions and sensations through our design, making sure that every corner of the project reflects the intended atmosphere. With the Eden Springs, I aim to create a tranquil and serene environment that provides a resort-like feeling. I firmly believe that the name of a project can set the tone for the design direction and help to inspire not only our clients, but first us as designers, since we need to come up with a design. But we will talk more about designing later on. For now, let's focus on the Eden Springs floor plan. Upon downloading the Module 1 zip file from the download section, you will find a variety of useful documents in here. Included are 2 SketchUp files, one in millimeters and one in inches. This is like your master plan or backup floor plan, let's say. You can open it and have a look at how I created my groups for doors, windows and walls so you can recreate it. Additionally, the folder contains PDF files with a complete floor plan and all the necessary measurements. In the folder Import JPEG, I have included 2 images as JPEG files for you to import into your Sketchup file when rebuilding your floor plan. For this plan, it doesn't make sense to use technique number 1, meaning building your plan solely by creating guides, as this house is too big and has too many measurements you would have to look up. We do have a digital plan, so let's make use of it. Technique number 2 involves importing the floor plan as an image, scaling it up, and drawing the elements. Please be informed that I recommend always uploading a JPEG file or PNG file instead of a PDF. The problem is that SketchUp does not do well with PDFs. You can certainly increase the quality for import in the settings, but in my experience, that is still not enough to be able to see the measurements that well. So I always make a screenshot from my floor plan in case I get PDFs. If you feel confident in your ability to create the outer walls, the doors, and the windows without additional practice, you can simply use the master file I provided and continue with those for the next videos. Ultimately, the choice is yours if you want to practice more floor plan building or skip this part and work with the master file. In the next video, I will draw the floor plan by importing the JPEG file one last time. It's still worth to watch the video, since I want to show you a couple more things there. Alright, see you in the next chapter. Let's begin by creating a new file now. If you have chosen the default template with the heart icon in the template section, it will automatically open once you click File, New. If you haven't done so, I would like to open another template. Then you can click on File, New from Template. Once the file is open, please save it. It is important to save your work as often as you can to avoid losing any progress in case of a SketchUp crash. Next, import the JPEG file and scale it up. Now, select the X-ray mode and you can start creating lines and surfaces as we have learned in the previous lessons. I start with creating all walls first. Now this is how your walls should look like. Have a look specifically at the surfaces of the floor, the walls, the windows, and the door area and how they separate from each other. This is super important once we start building our walls up to be able to separate those surfaces from another. A good base will save you time in the end, so make it a habit to create detailed floor plans from the beginning, especially if you're going to use this one and build up your 3D from it. Now I create my windows. You may be able to copy some and adjust them to save yourself time. You may notice that the window representation differs slightly from those in previous videos. Some windows have 3 lines, while others have 5. I chose this display to represent whether my windows extend from floor to ceiling or have walls underneath them. This visual cue will help during spatial planning, reminding me which windows are full height and which are not. So let's now adjust those windows which are full height and simply keep 3 lines only instead of 5. Now I start grouping my windows by selecting the surfaces and click Command G. Once we have finished grouping our windows, I would like to demonstrate what will occur underneath the windows. This area is essentially cut out from our floor plan, and this step will prove beneficial when we begin constructing our walls. Trust me and follow this workflow, it will all become clear in the end. Next, we need to group our walls and floors before proceeding to create doors. Otherwise, the same effect will occur where this area will be cut out from our floor plan. However, in this case, we will want to preserve the surface for our floor. To accomplish this, select all surfaces and exclude the windows by holding Shift and clicking on them, since they are already grouped. Now we can group everything else that is remain. Now we can proceed with creating the doors and make copies since they are all the same width. You can obviously decide on how you want to represent your windows that makes the most sense to you and your client. There are various ways to depict 2D windows depending on the specific type of window you want to showcase. You can search the web for examples of how to display fixed windows, sliding windows, and other variations to create them accurately. Now in this case, in our Eden Springs floor plan, I have incorporated fixed windows with additional divisions. This means that some windows have an extra vertical frame within them to indicate multiple divisions. Then I also have incorporated ladders for my windows. This is because I want to provide you with more details about the divisions and wall heights that may be underneath the windows. You can have a look at how I displayed that within the PDF plan, or you can also see it here since we imported the first page of the PDF. We're going to need those informations once we start building our 3D walls up. To create letters or words in general, you can click on 3D text. There you can type in your text or letter. You can choose your alignment, your fonts, and its size. If you click Filled, your letter will be filled with the surface. Otherwise, it only creates lines. You can leave the extruded part out, since this will create a 3D text. We don't want that in this case. Please note that Sketchup usually inverts the text for some reason, so you may need to reverse the faces. You can do so by going inside the letter or word with a double click. Then you click Command A and select All. Then you click Right to reverse the faces. I have also incorporated skylights and arched door openings, which I usually display with dotted lines within Sketchup. Unfortunately, there is no current tool which automatically creates dotted lines. I hope Sketchup will incorporate this in the future. You have the option in Sketchup Layout though, but in this case, I want to showcase them within my floor plan. Let me show you now quickly how I would create this skylight. I start by creating guides to set my middle point for my circle. Then I know that my skylight is at 800 millimeters in diameter or 31.5 inches. So I create my outer circle. Then I use my offset tool to create another line in between. The middle part will be my frame. You can use the standard frame size we have used for the windows of 50 millimeters or 1.97 inches, or you choose another thickness. Then I click on the Explode curve for both circles and remove the lines in between. Then I also group both lines to be able to copy this skylight to another place. For lines it's very similar, only that you need to click right and say divide. By moving your mouse up and down, you see that it shows a preview of how many faces you want to divide it into. Let's say I choose 16 to be able to achieve a similar look like the circle version. Then I also just remove the lines in between. On top of my floor plan, you will see that I have copied all my doors, windows and openings. This way I could potentially save time for future projects and just copy this box from one file to another. I may need to adjust the size of my windows depending on the project obviously, but I will definitely save time by this. You could also build a completely separate Sketchup file to collect all your 2D symbols to be able to use them later on. It could be like a master file for your 2D symbols. Just so you know, since you bought this course with me, you are free to use all my symbols and all my furniture and even textures I have built for all your projects, so don't need to worry. So please go ahead if you want to practice this. You can recreate the whole floor plan just the way I showed you in this video. If you already know or feel comfortable doing this, you can use my master file. In the next video, I will show you how we do the spatial planning for each room.